Before we get to economic mobility, before we get to your role as chairman, I do want to ask you about the situation in Iran and about the potential for some sort of resolution, some sort of closure to what is now a more than 2-month-long war. What happens?
Look, we will see this wrap up, and we will see it wrap up in time. In 2 months, we've already had extraordinary success. If you look at the military objectives that President Trump laid out right at the front end, Iran's air defenses have been utterly destroyed. Their ballistic missiles and the ballistic missile manufacturing capability completely gone. Their drones and drone manufacturing capability destroyed. Their air force in complete rubble, and their navy sunk on the bottom of the sea. The Ayatollah is dead. The mullahs are dead. Just about every senior military leader is dead. In terms of military successes, it took Iran 40 years to build up a military that we systematically dismantled in 39 days. That is extraordinary success. Now, phase two. President Trump has laid out a series of red lines that Iran can have no enriched uranium. Iran must hand over the enriched uranium they already have. Iran must stop funding terrorism, and they need to open the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, when does that happen? And particularly with the Strait of Hormuz. And look, I mean, you represent a state that is basically the heart of our energy sector. And they're all affected by this. Even if they're domestic producers, we're all affected by this global market here. What are those executives in your state? What are they asking you, or at least asking from Congress and the government to do?
Listen, what I'm hearing from Texans is that we're seeing real success in Iran. And if you look right now, we're not today in a major shooting war with Iran. There are not active hostilities. What the president has done is he shifted to a different phase, which is the United States is blockading Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. That is imposing over $500 million of economic loss on Iran every single day. And here's the real kicker.
But no one else is getting through either. It's not just Iranian ships.
Well, but look, if you look at the Iranian oil where it goes predominantly to China, so it's also imposing cost on China. But here's the enormous economic leverage. Iran is just a couple of days away from running out of oil storage capacity. When that happens, they will have no choice but to shut in their wells. When you shut in a well, inevitably what happens is water seeps in to the reserves, and when you restart production, it drops. If they shut in their wells, Iran will see their production permanently drop anywhere from 500,000 to 800,000 barrels a day. That is massive economic leverage that the president is imposing on them, and it is very disproportionate. The United States is the world's leading producer of oil and gas, and so we're able to absorb this impact. Iran, I think America is much safer today with the Ayatollah no longer with us, with their military weakened, and my objective, I want to see this regime collapse. Now, I don't have a dog in the fight of who the next leader is, as long as it's not an Islamist who chants death to America and is actively murdering Americans, because that's what the current regime has been doing.
Well, Senator, I want to talk a little bit more about the effects that this is having on the U.S. economy, because you mentioned, where the U.S. sits as a net oil producer has insulated us from what's going on in Asia, in Europe, but it hasn't completely shielded us from that. You think about average gas prices across the country, well above $4 a barrel, let alone what it is in California, where we are right now. I mean, those are costs that people need to pay. You think about filling up your car. You think about heating your home. So I wonder how the Republican Party plans on communicating that to voters ahead of a very consequential midterm elections where the cost of living just continues to go higher.
Well, look, I'll say in terms of gas prices, you go back a couple of years under Joe Biden, and gas prices were about $6 a gallon. President Trump and the Republicans in Congress came in, and we dropped it in half to about $3 a gallon. That was a massive savings. Now, anytime you have a military conflict in the Middle East, that's going to have an upward pressure on gas prices. So gas prices have risen to about $4.5 a gallon. So it's gone up about halfway from the distance it fell. That being said, this conflict will be over. It will be over in a matter of months. And when it is over, if we can have anything like a stable regime in Iran, that will have a long-term major downward pressure on gas prices. But more importantly, look, the Iranian regime is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. They've killed nearly 1,000 Americans. The president is acting to keep people safe. And by the way, you noted California. California people are paying $7 a gallon. That is not because of Iran. That is because Gavin Newsom and the Democrats tax and regulate the heck out of gas. They've made the decision that they want it to be really expensive to live in California, which is a big part of the reason so many people are leaving California.
I hear what you're saying, but the trajectory, of course, follows that of the national average. I do want to talk about the impact on jet fuel prices. We saw the demise of Spirit over the weekend, and I know that you were particularly vocal about being against a potential government bailout of that airline. And, you know, where we sit here on Monday with Spirit ceasing operations, do you still stand by that?
Listen, Spirit did not have to go under. And in fact, Spirit just 2 years ago had a plan to save themselves. They had a merger with JetBlue. They were the two ultra-low-cost carriers. They wanted to merge. JetBlue was ready to infuse $3.8 billion into Spirit. And Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg went in and blocked the merger. And they killed Spirit Airlines. Spirit Airlines said at the time, if we don't merge, we will go bankrupt. We cannot survive unless we merge with JetBlue. And Biden and Warren and Buttigieg, they beat their chests, they defeated the merger, and as a result, 17,000 people this week lost their jobs. Not only that, consumer prices are going up.
Yeah. But were you involved in any of the discussions potentially for a bailout? I mean, I know the Trump administration was considering. So what happened?
So I was actively involved. I think a government bailout was a terrible idea. I was very vocal saying we should not be bailing out corporations across the board. And the federal government doesn't know a damn thing about running a budget airline. And so I said that publicly and very vocally. Last week, I had dinner with Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. Howard is a good friend. He and I work together very closely.
Was he advocating for a bailout?
He was the leading advocate of the bailout. I will tell you, in the course of the dinner, we spent probably half the time at dinner with me making the case vigorously. This is a really bad idea. The analogy I drew, I said, look, the plan was $500 million in exchange for 90% of the shares in Spirit. I said, look, it'd be better if you took $500 million, put it in a pile on the floor, poured gasoline on it, lit it on fire.
That sounds expensive, too.
But there you'd at least get some heat. You could roast some marshmallows. You'd get something positive. My case was, if we pour it into the airline, we'll lose the money. And the federal government has zero expertise. Who thinks the federal government knows how to schedule flight attendants? Who thinks the federal government knows how to get a suitcase from Pittsburgh to Cleveland? I mean, just the mechanics of running an airline, there is no expertise in the federal government. I'm very glad the president made the right decision. We're not going down this road. It would have been a serious mistake if we had.